Hello and welcome to India's World. Today we are going to discuss the India-Bangladesh Land Boundary Agreement, which the Indian Parliament is expected to ratify in the near future. India shares a 4,096-kilometer land border with Bangladesh, which abuts the 5 Indian states of Assam, Tripura, Mizoram, Meghalaya and West Bengal. Any settlement of the border would require exchange of territory. Previous attempts at exchanging territory with Bangladesh have run into trouble because Indian opposition parties have not accepted it. Territorial changes in India have to be ratified through a constitutional amendment, which requires a two-thirds majority in Parliament. The previous United Progressive Alliance government had signed the land boundary agreement with Bangladesh in 2011. However, it was unable to forge the political consensus for a constitutional amendment to ratify it. Under the proposed settlement, India will acquire 51 Bangladeshi enclaves in its territory and 2,777 acres of land. Simultaneously, it would also transfer 111 Indian enclaves in Bangladeshi territory and 2,267 acres of land to Bangladesh. To discuss the various dimensions of this historic border settlement, we have with us a very distinguished panel of experts. We have with us Ambassador Veena Sikri. She was a High Commissioner in Bangladesh and is currently Professor and Head of Bangladesh Studies at Jamia Millia Islamia in Delhi. And we have with us Ambassador Pinak Ranjan Chakravarty. He was also High Commissioner to Bangladesh. He was also Indian Ambassador to Thailand and is currently a distinguished fellow at a think tank, Observer Research Foundation in New Delhi. And we are very lucky to have Ambassador Rajeet. He was also Indian High Commissioner to Bangladesh. He followed Ambassador Chakravarty in Dhaka. He was also the Indian Ambassador to the Philippines and has signed most of the maps for transfer of enclaves. So I welcome all of you to this discussion. Ambassador Sikri, let me begin with you. So why is the India-Bangladesh border different from other borders that India has with its neighbors? Even before Bangladesh it came into being, this was a troublesome border. It couldn't be settled by Cyril Radcliffe in 1947. It couldn't be settled by the India-Pakistan Border Disputes Tribunal set up under a Swedish judge in 1949. The Nehru-Noon Pact on the India-East Pakistan border of 1958 also could not settle it. And the Sheikh Mujibur Rahman Indira Gandhi agreement of 1974 also did not settle it. So what's so peculiar about this border?
Well, first of all, it's a very porous border, India's longest land border with any country. Very porous because the lines that Radcliffe drew was regardless of villages or homes, and sometimes you have a drawing room in one, living room in one country and the kitchen in another country. And then because of the porous nature, full of illegal activity. I would say that both governments, Bangladesh and India, have not paid enough attention to developing prosperity in the border regions. Because of that, it's become a center of illegal activity, illegal migration from Bangladesh to India, cattle smuggling from India to Bangladesh. And because of the length of the border, it's very difficult to monitor the border. Even after building of the fence, the same issue has gone on. But I would say also that it has become enmeshed in state politics. Let's, for example, compare the border between West Bengal and Bangladesh with the border between Mizoram and Bangladesh. The border between Mizoram and Bangladesh is very peaceful. There is no illegal migration. So you do have a great difference in activity. So a lot of it also has been because this illegal migration has become a part of vote bank politics. Yeah. It has become, maybe people vote on both sides of the border. And over the years, because of the troublesome nature, governments have let it be. Okay. The Nehru-Noon agreement you spoke about went to the Supreme Court, and so it could not be implemented.
Okay, but let me take some different aspects of the border to Pinak. Can you explain the difference between the three different aspects of the India-Bangladesh border? The undemarcated part of the border, the areas under adverse possession, and the existence of enclaves.
You see, the enclaves, as you had mentioned in your figures, about 50 odd on our side and 111 on the other side. Adverse possessions and the undemarcated. Undemarcated is a very small, we tend to look at the glass half empty, but we did manage to demarcate most of the border, except for the 6.2 kilometers in 3 sectors. That also, I think, finally, when the idea was mooted as to how to solve these problems, it was felt that the 1974 agreement, which was also called Indira Mujib agreement, the border agreement, which could not be implemented because of various reasons, that let us at least change the international border itself, that is the Radcliffe line itself, to take care of this adverse possession business. Now, I don't want to get into too much detail of what exactly is an adverse possession, but basically these are small pieces of land adjoining the border which is owned by somebody on the other side. That's why it's called an adverse possession. So basically that was the deal, a package deal, that we change the border, sort out the adverse possessions once and for all, and that also, exchange of land was not too much, and finally the LBA was signed. Now it is basically, there is exchange of land. Enclaves are not a problem because they are in any case islands surrounded by the territory of the other country. In any case, that is going to be absorbed by that country because you cannot even access it from our side or they from their side. So that is how it is, and as you said, a constitutional amendment is required. But there are state units of political parties.
We'll come to that. We'll come to that.
Yeah, sure.
Ambassador Mitter, what is the origin of the enclaves? Should we believe the legend that these enclaves are a result of rulers on both sides wagering villages in games of chess or gambling, or is it really a legacy of pre-colonial past where Bengal was under the Mughals, Cooch Behar remained independent, and people owned properties and fiefs on both sides?
Well, the accepted version is that the Maharaja of Cooch Behar over the centuries gave away bits of territory to the Raja of Rangpur, which later became Bangladesh, and vice versa. So you have these enclaves. As you know that Cooch Behar, being a princely state, acceded to the Indian Union in 1949 and actually became part of West Bengal province in 1950. So then it was discovered that there are little islands of East Pakistan territory within Cooch Behar state. And similarly, Cooch Behar state had some pockets of territory in what was originally the Rangpur area of East Pakistan and was there. So as has been mentioned, these were anomalies which were impossible to administer for each of the countries, and I think right from the beginning the idea has been that these should be swapped.
Sikri, what are second order and third order enclaves? Is it correct that the India-Bangladesh border is the only border in the world which has a third order enclave at Dahala, Chakravarty? What does it mean? And when you swap territory, so you don't consider second and third order enclaves. You just consider the first order enclave and pass it on to whoever's land surrounds it.
Actually, in this agreement that has now been agreed, that has been discussed all the time, I think that this idea is that any enclave which is in another country should be given to that country.
Even if there are other enclaves inside it?
Yes, I think but that will all become part of that country because you can't access something within another country. The idea is for ease of access, really. And the big enclaves like Dahagram, Angarpota, which is in the north, that in fact is entirely surrounded by Indian territory, but because there's only a very small bit of land of few kilometers or 1 kilometer between that space and the mainland Bangladesh. So it was agreed that Dahagram Angarpota should go to Bangladesh, and India has made a special agreement where an overbridge has been built to make access for the people of mainland Bangladesh to go to Dahagram Angarpota. For a long time there was an idea of giving a land, permanent lease of land, etc. But there was objection from the villagers on both sides of that, within the Indian villagers. So ultimately this overbridge idea has been given, electrification has been allowed and so on. So actually whatever could be done without a constitutional amendment was done. But now that the constitutional amendment has become necessary, it was stuck. And I would say that actually despite the agreement being signed in September 2011, for 2 years, at that time it was not a political issue. Only because the UPA government did not bring it into parliament that it could not be.
We're going to discuss this further, but we need to take a break at this point. We'll be back again in a bit. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the India-Bangladesh land boundary agreement. Ambassador Mitter, we know that the enclaves are an anomaly and therefore require swapping of territory. But what principles were used to come to an agreement on areas under adverse possession? Because they're essentially encroachments, aren't they?
Originally in the 1974 agreement, the adverse possessions, it was decided would also be swapped. And you go back to the original Radcliffe line. But surveys were done over the years, joint surveys, and it was decided to take a more practical and pragmatic view because people are living there for centuries and they are attached to that land. It would have meant uprooting a whole lot of people. So the idea was to take into account the realities, the economic realities and the humanitarian realities on the ground, which was jointly surveyed by both the countries, and to change the boundary to that extent. And these are very small areas, it's not large tracts of land, and this is a much more feasible and pragmatic and sustainable.
They also require giving up of territory.
Yeah, giving up and getting.
And getting.
In fact, the idea is that about 2,700 acres will come to India and about 2,200 acres will go to Bangladesh. So if you take the totality of it, this is not a big amount of land.
Pinak, how does the non-settlement of the border affect the people living in these areas? Who provides them services? Which is their government? Who do they make demands on? What is the daily life like? Have you been there?
Yes, of course. I've been to many of these enclaves and adverse possessions. The daily life, let me begin with the adverse possession. The villager on whichever side has to go across the border to till the land. His village is right next to the border. So he has to take a little chit or a border kind of a pass from one side or the other and go into that piece of land. So when I interviewed some of these villagers and before we put up this whole plan, mooted this whole plan, I asked them that what if we take away this land, how would you feel? He said, look, I've been living here for generations, I've been tilling this land. So I said, what would you like? I mean, what is the ideal solution? He says, ideally, if you give me this half acre of my land, which is now lying in Indian territory, to me, and then I won't have this problem of tilling my land and carrying on with my life as I have. So that is how it originated, that look, we can solve this by tweaking the international boundary itself, which was, I mean, seen as very sacrosanct at one time, so nobody wanted to do anything about it. Now, the enclaves, for example, are there, but they are virtually integrated into the countryside of that country. In the sense that, but they have problems. They don't have identity cards, they don't get facilities, no ration cards, their children can't go to school because they are stateless, more or less. Except for the fact that many of them, and I think people have a way of solving these problems. I think when I asked people in the enclaves, because there was this issue that if we exchange, then you have to give the population the choice of either being absorbed in becoming Bangladeshis or coming back to India, if it in the question of an Indian enclave. My sense was, at that time, talking to many of them, and I believe the people had already exchanged lands in an informal basis. So those who were living in Indian enclaves in Bangladesh told me very clearly that they had no wish to go to India because they had already done some swaps with people. And similarly on this side.
Sikri, what is the extent of illegal trade and smuggling along the India-Bangladesh border, and to what extent will it come down because you will now have a well-defined border? Will the cattle trade, for example, come down once you have a proper border?
Well, that's very difficult to say. The extent of illegal trade is perhaps double, at least double of the legal trade. So it could be anywhere from $5 billion and more. And it's very difficult to estimate. Any kind of estimate fails because even a 10 rupee difference in price on one side or the other causes smuggling to take place. Whether it'll come down, it could in parts because the undemarcated areas have become corridors of illegal activity since people know they are undemarcated and BSF doesn't know whether it can take action and BGB on the other side. So, but since the actual undemarcated areas are a very small percentage of the overall 4,000 kilometer long border, it is very important for both governments to really sit down and decide to solve this problem of illegal migration and cattle smuggling. And actually the idea is to make these borders as areas of prosperity. One idea of border hearts, trading at the border, that has been developed over the years and some of them are working well, and this idea is to have more and more of these border hearts, so that these border markets become legal areas of exchange of goods instead of becoming, illegal headload smuggling across the border. Now, if this can be developed professionally, if both sides...
But border hearts, can they bring in, for example, Chinese goods to border hearts to sell to Indians?
Well, this is a problem. I mean, this happens that, third country goods come in because actually it's supposed to be for exchange of goods between people living across the area. But invariably you find Chinese goods are getting smuggled into it, and that's a problem because it's not really serving the purpose. And you find this even with the Myanmar India border in Manipur and so on. Same problem everywhere. So we have to develop the prosperity and economy of those areas so that people can develop their small scale industries and make them actually. Otherwise, they are so peripheral, they're so remote from the state capital, leave alone from the central capital in Delhi, that people have ignored these areas too much over these.
That's a point well made. Ambassador Mitter, the present land boundary agreement was signed by Prime Minister Manmohan Singh in 2011. At that point, the Bharatiya Janata Party had opposed it tooth and nail. So had the Trinamool Congress, and so had actually some sections of the Congress in Assam. Now, how is it that suddenly better sense has prevailed over the BJP and Mamata Banerjee and even the Congress government in Assam, that they're all supporting the land boundary agreement?
I think there is obviously a realization that this was a very long problem which has been festering actually since partition, and it's in our interest, in our mutual interest of India-Bangladesh relations, that the boundary be settled. And a lot of effort went into making these changes in the boundary. There were joint surveys done repeatedly. There was even a head count done in the enclaves to ascertain the views of the people. And the realization that in other respects, India-Bangladesh relations have done so well in the last 5 or 6 years that we should settle this and have a secure border. And I think that realization is there. And if you remember when Prime Minister Manmohan Singh went to Dhaka, 4 of the chief ministers from Northeast accompanied him. And the state governments have been consulted at every stage on the border issue. Their people were involved in the survey teams and things like that. So I think that realization has come, and it's in the interest of our long-term relations with Bangladesh.
But Mamata Banerjee at that time didn't go with the Prime Minister, but now she's saying that I would like to give citizenship rights to all the people who've been denied the rights, etc. So politically also it suits her now.
Well, citizenship, it's in the agreement, the draft agreement, that those who are living in the enclaves and will want to continue living there can take the nationality of the new country, or they come back. I think the West Bengal government was more concerned about the Tista agreement at that time rather than the land boundary agreement, and that was the issue.
All right. So we need to take a break again at this point. Stay with us. Don't go away. Welcome back. We're discussing the India-Bangladesh land boundary agreement. Pinak, there have been some unhappy voices even now in Assam over the land swap deal. Is it because the riverine border with Bangladesh and the emergence of chars, which they keep shifting every dry season, so you don't know where the border really lies?
You see, the riverine sections have always been the source of the problem, because much of the informal cross-border trade and illegal kind of activity, including migration, takes place along the riverine border, because the land borders are fenced, so it's more difficult to do it there, although it does happen there as well. They cut the fence, etc. So the riverine parts are today the most vulnerable parts of the border. I mean, there is and the rule is that the median rule usually applies. Thalweg principle that runs to the middle of the channel. So there is patrolling and things like that, but the cattle smuggling and all goes on through the riverine border as well. Now, in Assam, for example, I mean, much of the riverine border is up north near Karimganj and Dhubri district and all that. And that, as you know, there has been a lot of illegal migration there, and virtually, swamping some of these districts, the 2 of these districts. But then, what do you do? I mean, the sense that riverine border cannot be fenced because it's water and it moves, and the char lands come up, which leads to more, illegal settlement of people. But the char lands are a different thing than adverse possessions. They're not the same thing. Because, for example, in the eastern, near our Tripura border, there's a river called Feni, which keeps moving here and there. But since the Thalweg principle says that it has to be the median line, so and the river has been moving into Bangladesh, eating away Bangladeshi territory, and we say that the Thalweg principle means that char land which emerges on this side, that is on, let's say, on the eastern side of the river, then now belongs to India. So in short, you have actually a movable border.
Western side of the river.
Eastern, actually, because if it moves into Bangladesh, so that's west of Tripura, so and that's why on the eastern side. So you have a movable border, but so Bangladesh has been complaining about that. So we've tried to fix a border there, have a fixed border, which does with some reference to the river as well, so that people who lose land when the river moves are somehow, taken care of.
Okay. Do you agree with Pinak where he says that the riverine border is a greater security threat than the land border? But how about compared to the enclaves? Is the illegal immigration taking place to the riverine border more, or are the enclaves a security threat? Because Prime Minister Modi has justified the support and the need for this land boundary agreement, saying that this would prevent illegal immigration of Bangladeshis?
Actually, yes. You know, the riverine border, I think we have to look at more maybe modern techniques of solving it. Embankment of the river, for example. Once you embank a river, then the chances of the river changing its border changing its route so frequently would be minimized. So I think
But
we have to look at...
Brahmaputra, you can't build
not
an
Brahmaputra.
embankment.
Talking of rivers like the
River,
Feni, Brahmaputra, of course, but that is not at the border. You have more I'm talking of rivers at the border, like the Feni and so on. But I think coming to the question of illegal migration, yes, I think once the enclaves are exchanged, then there's no excuse for the illegal movement of people. That absolutely then goes away. And in any case, you know, it's more an excuse right now because people who want to stay in Bangladesh and stay on as Bangladesh citizens are the ones who remain behind in the Indian enclaves inside Bangladesh. The others who had already decided they did not want to stay behind and they want to move to India have already moved. They've swapped land, as Pinak so rightly said. And similarly with the Bangladesh enclaves in India, those who want to stay on as Indian citizens are the ones who are left in these Bangladesh enclaves in India. So actually it is more the enclaves existence becoming an excuse for illegal migration. Once you solve the border, adverse possessions, a typical case of encouraging illegal migration. Now in one adverse possession in Assam, which the Chief Minister spoke about, you know, the land has been divided. Maybe out of 700 acres, 200 have gone to Bangladesh or 200 and something, and the rest has come to India. So by solving it, the excuse for illegal migration has gone.
Okay, you wanted to say something quickly.
No, I just want to say that the enclaves were becoming the entrepot for either smuggling or for people to sneak in and take shelter there, because the Indian police could not enter the Bangladeshi enclave.
Could not cross over the
so
Bangladesh
people coming
territory.
from there would seek refuge there and then melt into the countryside later. So that was another problem.
Ambassador Mitta, what are the implications of illegal immigration? Do you believe that it has only economic, social and political implications, or do you think our concerns are really more security related, because these people come and settle on the borders of our northeastern states and people here in India believe that their loyalty remains untested?
Well, illegal immigration is a old problem. It even goes back pre-partition, because there was a lot of movement of people from what is today Bangladesh into Assam, even in the 30s and 40s. So it's an old problem. It has been addressed at various stages, but I think it's a combination of all these factors, because there is certainly security issues involved, which is now we see from the Burdwan blast that has come out. But the drive with Bangladesh population increasing and the land being limited, there is always going to be a pressure for people to move in here, and there are jobs to be taken here. I mean, there are people who are looking to employ people here. So that is a natural movement of people that is happening.
You know, but if South Asia really becomes a South Asian Union, then there will be, if there's movement of capital, there will be movement of labor. Anyway, that's a separate issue. But Pinak, let me ask you this. In case India is not able to ratify the land boundary agreement, what kind of signal would it send to Bangladesh?
Well, it will not be a very good signal. And obviously they will again start, I mean, don't forget that since 1974, this has been sort of hanging fire despite the Indira Mujib agreement. And as my sort of colleagues have said, it was a problem left over from Radcliffe and 1947 as well. So if the Indian Parliament refuses or something happens which derails the process of the constitutional amendment, it would send a very wrong signal to Bangladesh, because they will again accuse of bad faith, that, you know, after so many years signing a new agreement, again it is not being ratified, because for ratification is necessary, or to amend the constitution for exchange of territory, because that's what the Indian constitution demands.
Sikri, do you think that now, I mean, it seems there's a political consensus developing on ratifying the land boundary agreement, and let's hope it gets ratified and constitution is amended. So do you think this will prepare the ground even for moving ahead on the stalled peace agreement?
Yes, I think so. Actually, Chief Minister Mamata Banerjee seems to have softened completely. I think it's related to her own internal situation within West Bengal, perhaps, and that she has now said positive things when she was last in Cooch Behar a few days ago, even about the Teesta agreement. Now, you see, I think that here the question is that even when the Teesta agreement, if you look at it, the question is, what are you going to exchange? What quantity of water? And that quantity of water depends on the actual flows in the Teesta, which the two sides have never measured together. You know, the Indian estimate of how much water in the Teesta in the dry season and the Bangladesh estimate of that same is not there.
But this was an interim agreement in any case,
Yeah,
during which time we would, 10 years time, where we would exchange
data. So that is why the logic of going ahead with it and getting the goodwill of Bangladesh is an important one that Mamata Banerjee has now realized, because she's realized it's linked to the stability within her own state. Now look what happened in the Burdwan blast. The Sheikh Hasina, Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina, took action against the GMB in Bangladesh, but they all came over to India and there was no check on their activities in India by the state government till the Burdwan blast happened, and now the linkages with Pakistan, with Myanmar, with Bangladesh, with India, the joint security threat is so evident in not solving these issues, because it becomes a point of ill will, which the people of Bangladesh develop because the opposition parties use this. Look, India is being the big brother, they're not agreeing. So there's a strong reason for agreeing on both Teesta and
Okay, thank you. That's very well put. We've run out of time, and I hope both the land boundary agreement and the Teesta water sharing agreement get done, and our relationships with Bangladesh, keep improving. I would like to thank all of you, Ambassador Mittal, Ambassador Pinak, Ranjan, Chakravarty, Ambassador Veena, Sikri, for coming here and discussing this complicated issue. That's all we have for you today. We'll be back again next week as usual. Till then, goodbye and thanks for watching.